Welcome back to AI News Without the Hype. We're going to go through the biggest news stories in AI happening this week and tell you what's important, what you need to know so that you can stay informed and stay ahead of the curve when it comes to AI and AI adoption. So let's get started with a little bit of a fun story. Somebody made a GeoGuessr. If you don't know what a GeoGuessr is, it's a game people play where you see an image on the map that's totally random from Google Maps, and you have to guess the location, and whoever gets closest wins. Well, somebody made one that not only does that piece, but actually puts it into a place in time. So they used GPT image 2 and basically generated as realistic as possible from historical knowledge looking images. That's a total panoramic 360 degree that you can move around in. And now you can guess not just the location, but the time period. So really interesting, and one of the most fun use cases of AI image generation, where you can really create scenes that feel real in the multimedia sense, right? Because it's recreating that 360 degree experience and creating something out of history that allows you to live inside of it. So really interesting, really neat idea. I just thought it was an interesting use case to show how far image generation is getting, that somebody can create a system like this. So it shows you a map, you click on the map, and it takes you to that location, and it shows you as if it was like a Google map view. So you can rotate around, you can look in all directions, but it's from a historical time period in that location. And, there's pros and cons when it comes to learning history with AI. On the one hand, it makes it so much more accessible. On the other hand, of course, it paints a picture that may not always be correct, is literally fake, but also might be misleading. Now, I want to talk about this idea that's gaining a lot of traction, which is this idea to create a company brain with AI, and why Combinator is inviting people to create a company brain and apply to Y Combinator to get funding. Y Combinator, if you don't know, is probably the biggest startup accelerator in the world. They're doing a lot of AI now, so it feels like an AI accelerator. But basically, they issue investment to very early stage companies that are trying to become unicorns, trying to become big businesses, hyperscalers, hyper growers. So that's what they do. So now they're inviting people to build this company brain and saying that's one of the most important technologies that is going to be created, most important software layers is going to be created. And this is sparking a lot of debate. There's a lot of people working on this idea, but there's a lot of pushback that it's not exactly possible, that you wind up wasting a lot of time just trying to curate the knowledge, and that knowledge is too opaque. You can never pin it down. It's always shifting. You're always adding more data systems, more software to the stack, more things that you would have to integrate with it. It takes too much management. It's hard to actually observe. What I've experienced is that AI has a really difficult time with implications that humans get automatically. So I'll give you a really quick example. If you and I were talking and we worked in a company together and we were talking about the need to produce some new set of videos that we thought were going to be really good, and we went back and forth talking about it, these could be marketing videos, and we're discussing this whole series and which channel it's going to be on and all this stuff. And then we get a call from the head of partnerships that says that we just landed this big deal with Mr. Beast, and he wants to make 5 videos about our company. And we all jump into that and we start discussing that. And we are clearly going to run in that direction and not in the other direction, not making those 10 videos we were talking about. We as humans can understand the implications that one idea could sunset another, meaning like one idea could be what we're pursuing now and previous ideas are no longer relevant. unless that's explicitly spelled out to an AI, it has a hard time understanding that. So it's not going to realize that you had this new thing that superseded the old. And I see this all the time. It's even with my example, it's a little bit hard to understand unless you try to have AI follow decisions in real time and understand what's being decided upon. And then you'll see, oh yeah, it's really difficult because it's not strictly logical. It's not strictly just matching language patterns. It takes intuitive inference to understand, oh yeah, we're discussing this point. That means this other point is no longer valid. And the humans can do it automatically. They can understand. I can come in with some urgency, say, hey, listen, we got a big day today. Here's what we're working on. And you can understand that your calendar just changed. But the AI, unless I specifically say, hey, we need to reschedule these items based on this new information, it has a surprisingly difficult time really understanding that. And one of the solutions is to surface possibilities over time. So it could hear that calendar instance and it could send me a little message and say, hey, I heard you have a busy schedule. Do you want me to change your calendar? Well, that can work, but then AI can be giving too many notifications. It can be making too many decisions. So it's hard to find that line between teaching the AI, okay, we want you to track decisions and track knowledge as it changes and track truth as it changes. But we need you to understand things that might be hinted at or might be intuitive that aren't explicitly spelled out. If you do that, it's just going to start thinking everything is intuitive. And so I don't know if I'm being super clear in this. Hopefully you can understand what I'm getting at, but the basic point is that AI has a really hard time with tracking human thought process in real time and actually understanding the implications of all of it. It's kind of an idiot savant. Netflix co-founder and Anthropic board member Reid Hastings says something that I agree with, and whenever I hear something I agree with by a smart, successful person, I like to point it out that I said the same thing so that you can give me tons of credit and sing my praises. And what he said was, we won't watch robots play basketball. He says human first content is likely to stay on top, and I completely agree with this. And if you go on TikTok, people push back on this point when I said that Hollywood is not going to be toppled by AI. There's no chance. And they made the point that, people just like what they like and they don't necessarily seek this, deeper human connection. But I don't think it's that simple. I do think that humans tend to look to and admire what mirrors them, what reminds them of what they believe, what they stand for, what makes them feel good about themselves. And when you're dealing with a robot that's just programmed to evoke a certain way, there's a limit to what that can accomplish. So yeah, you can enjoy a little comedy video that's 5 minutes long. You can take a book that you love and put it into an AI and have it turn into a movie. And, especially if you're a little bit involved in the creative process, you can really fall in love with it. But there's really a limit to that. And so a captivating, emotionally charged television series or movie that holds your attention from 2 hours to multiple years of seasons of content, you cannot replace that with AI, and I don't think that will ever change. Now, something I don't understand that nobody understands but is worth paying attention to. A lot of CTOs of billion-dollar companies are quitting to take roles at Anthropic. So you have the Workday CTO, and let me just make sure I get this right. So yeah, the Workday CTO, U.com, Instagram, Box, Super.com, Adept AI, all of those CTOs quit and joined Anthropic in the last year. So I don't know why this is happening, but let's pay attention to it and try to understand it. I mean, it could just be Anthropic is eating everybody. Speaking of Anthropic, one of their main competitors, Google, who's now invested in Anthropic, by the way, just announced a partnership with Exa. So EXA is an agent-first search. So this is really interesting because Google is a search engine, but they partnered with Exa, which is a search engine for agents, in order to give the Gemini models better access to the internet to understand websites, technical docs, papers, etc. Another thing, I don't quite understand the thinking here, but apparently Exa just is much better at search that agents can perform and access than Google. So it seems like a surprising partnership when Google literally owns search and their entire business model is dependent upon owning search. But they partnered with Exa. So I don't know enough about Exa to make a strong statement about it, but another thing that's I thought was super interesting that I wanted to mention, and I think that it shows how complex the ecosystem of AI is, and we're still figuring out how all the different pieces fit together. I think what it says, maybe I do have something to say about it, because I think what it says is that we really underestimate the change that has occurred now that AI is going to be doing more activity than humans. When I say activity, I mean in the digital space, when it comes to browsing and accessing information and taking actions, we're moving towards AI being the primary browser and action taker compared to humans. And the fact that Google, who has owned human digital search for 25 years, has partnered with a company that specializes in AI search in order to improve their AI systems, I think really speaks to how we have really entered a new era. Because it's almost unthinkable that they would do that from a pure business standpoint, but from a technology standpoint, apparently it's that important that the way that agents access the internet is fundamentally different than humans, and therefore the way we need to be thinking about how we deploy digital products, websites, etc., needs to be fundamentally different, which is a great transition to this story, which is that Adobe has opened up access to Claude. So in Claude now, you can create content with Adobe by simply typing and talking to Claude. I've been very defensive of software. I've been defensive of software doing this because I do think that this is in general the future. And, I made the case last week with Salesforce that it was a great decision for them to open up Claude access, because it means that you can now use the tool as you want. And I don't think that that necessarily means that there's no point of Salesforce anymore, right? Because there are times when you want to go into the UI. There are times when you want the workflows that it gives you. And therefore, it's nice to be able to use AI, to be able to use it where you're already working in Claude to control and access Salesforce, while still knowing in the back of your mind that the minute you need to do more robust work, you can just hop into Salesforce and do it. So I guess that's the same point here with Adobe. I think they are much, much more at risk because I think that, I think it's a fundamentally flawed company. I think that they've been surviving for so many years by owning so much of the creative stack that integrates together that they were able to kind of lock you in, and then they became like a default. And I think that when you break that up, when you break up the monopolistic fact that all of their tools integrate with each other, and so if you're in their ecosystem, it just makes sense to stay in their ecosystem. Once you break that up and you're outside of their ecosystem, I don't necessarily see a point to continuing to use Adobe. And I'm probably biased because, like many other people, I hate their subscription model and how they lock you in. And I think they're deceptive in how they do it. I have no problem with the subscription model, but they're very deceptive in how they handle it. And I would like to see competitors destroy them, if I'm being honest. Now, let's talk a little bit about the fact that Anthropic surpassed OpenAI in revenue. In 2025, they had $1 billion per year in ARR. And in 2026, about 13 months later, April 2026, they now have 30 billion. That's quite an explosive growth from 1 billion to 30 billion in 15 months. I don't think anybody's surprised. I think 6 months ago, people would have been surprised that Anthropic is beating OpenAI, but I think within the last couple months, it's become clear that Anthropic's just releasing products faster and building a whole ecosystem much faster, whereas Chat GPT seems to be mostly focused on, well, they're split, because on the one hand, they're focused on lower market, cheaper market product. They're focused on the chat interface product, which they're still far better than Anthropic, with voice chat. And so it's really sort of like an AI tool for the masses. And so they're definitely still winning on that front, just from a UI perspective. And then on the other hand, they're deep diving into code and enterprise, and they're kind of abandoning everything in the middle. And that's where Anthropic is really winning, is in the middle. Everyone that's doing business work isn't a huge enterprise, but also isn't just asking for dating tips and jokes. Not that there's anything wrong with those things. Now, speaking of Claude, they're now connected also to Blender. So Blender, if you don't know, is an open source animation studio, animation suite software. It's the best free open source one by far. And now you can control it through Claude, which is pretty incredible. Now, I want to wrap up with one really good, interesting story. So, I just realized in this post that I have, they don't actually say the guy's name. They just refer to him as this guy, which is a bit annoying because I would like to tell you who he is. But he left Google and made $1 billion bet that every AI company is building the wrong technology. That's what he says. So he was 13 years at DeepMind for Google, which was their AI lab. But he saw this issue that I just think this is fascinating, and I want to bring it up. So he saw this issue, which is that AI is being trained on human knowledge. And so because of that, there's a limit. And I've been speaking about this since AI first started to come out, that the models can get much, much, much smarter. But there is something like a limit because they're trained on human knowledge. And so if you collect all the human knowledge together, you're limited to doing what humans have done, to copying humans. Even if you can somehow isolate the best version or the best response you can get, you still lack original thinking. And so what he's doing is actually more like a first principles or a fundamental AI development, which is to allow AI to perform various tasks, see actual real feedback, and then train itself that way. And so it's not training by mimicking, it's training by performing. That's my understanding of it. I'm sure I'm oversimplifying it, but this was a similar idea that resulted in this famous match of Go. If you know the game Go, a really complicated board game. So it basically taught itself how to play, and then it beat the number one human player, the world champion. But not only did it beat them, but it made a move that was so unexpected. Analysts thought it was a bug. There was apparently a 1 in 10,000 chance that a human would ever make that move, and it turned out to be a totally brilliant move. So this is just a great example where it taught itself by not mimicking what others do, but by raw performance. And so that's what they're trying to accomplish. And this guy raised 1.1 billion in a seed round, which is the largest in European history, 5.1 billion valuation. not only before building a product, but before even a lot of the research is done. Sequoia is involved, NVIDIA, Google, British government, and that's what he's working on. And the reason I wanted to bring it up, not only is it an interesting story, but it is because apparently his name is something Silver. They bury this guy's name way in this article, so I'm having trouble finding it. I would really like to tell you what his name is. David Silver. Thank you. David Silver. So not only is it just an interesting story, just the details of it, quitting DeepMind, raising this money and everything, but I think that we will see soon another iteration of AI that is not large language models, that is going to be built around something like this, where it's more capable of original thought because it's actually working, seeing results, and learning in real time like a human would do, but with less of the mimicking aspect. And so that technology just makes sense that it's slower to create, because you obviously get a big head start if you just do what somebody else does. But I think it's overall going to be very effective and efficient. And that's where you might actually see something approaching like a super intelligence. You know, if you think about it, what is actually happening here is it's a computer that performs the same activity billions of times and sees the result of the activity, is graded on the results, basically being told you succeeded or you failed. And from that, it biases itself towards succeeding rather than failing. And because it runs these experiments billions of times, it learns how to succeed. Now, the LLM models, this is exactly how they work, except the way they work is what they're trying to do is predict the next block of text. So they're looking at text that already exists, and they're saying, okay, if this is the text so far, let's predict the next block. And they predict it. And they're either right or they're wrong. And they do this billions of times until they learn how to be right. So that's why we say they're essentially mimicking the human text, because they're learning to predict what a human is statistically likely to do in that situation. So there's going to be a hard limit on how smart these systems can be, because the best result they can ever get by their own programming is to correctly predict what a human would do, which is not super intelligence by definition. The only argument you can make that there's some type of superintelligence or capable of superintelligence is that they can do all these things, but they can access vastly more memory or vastly more information a lot faster because they're a computer than humans can. So if you combine like human-ish capabilities with vast near instant memory retrieval, you know, it's pretty smart. It's pretty impressive. So, but it's still limited in that it's not capable of original thought as of now. And so we'll see how the development of AI evolves and where it takes us. So if you enjoyed the video, give me a like and a comment. Don't worry about subscribing, because I don't care about subscriber count. I want likes, I want comments, I want video views, because that's what YouTube cares about. But if you really want to subscribe, go ahead. I'm not going to stop you. All right, and I'll see you next time. Don't forget to click it again when it pops up on your feed. If you watch this whole thing, the algorithm is going to show it to you. You don't need to subscribe.